Well, the situation is rapidly evolving. What started as, a couple days of rioting in Minnesota has turned into a sort of a nationwide riot, a total uprising against American society. It's funny looking back at the last, I guess 2 to 3 days ago, when I was discussing how, these riots aren't too good, and the cops are letting them burn so that they have an excuse to crack down on them later. Um, and how I thought that this was a bit more orchestrated, and I wasn't getting too excited about the rioting because I was thinking, well, this is just like what the cops have done in the past in other cities when there's been riots. They let it burn a little bit, and then they come in and they crack down and they put an end to it, and that's just sort of to serve as a reminder to the citizenry that they want cops around. But that didn't end up happening, and I started to change my tune yesterday when after I saw the press conference with the Minnesota governor and the mayor of Minneapolis, and it became clear that these folks just had no idea what they were doing, that there was no clear strategy behind what was going on, and that they were kind of at wit's end and were just begging for it all to stop. And of course, out of desperation, they decided to blame all the riots on out-of-state white supremacists that may or may not have been acting as a group. The mayor of St. Paul later came out and said that everyone who was arrested in St. Paul was from out of state. Something that I thought was, could not be true. Sounded absolutely ludicrous. I'm surprised that he even, could say it with a straight face. And unsurprisingly, last night he had to come out and say, yeah, I was misinformed. Everything that I said about all these folks being out of state, total nonsense. And in fact, the local news did an investigation there that found that the out of state people made up like maybe 20% of the arrests, which is, it's still a lot, so there are some out of state people there. But 80% of the folks arrested were Minnesota residents. But then, of course, that whole narrative of saying, oh, well, the Minnesota riots are created by outside agitators, from around some other state, totally flies out the window and becomes meaningless when we have riots erupting in every major American city. Because what are you saying? There's no rioters in Chicago either. Those are out-of-state agitators, white supremacists too. The rioters in New York are white supremacists. The rioters in Miami are white supremacists, all from some other state other than Illinois, New York, Florida. Same thing with L.A. Those folks are not from California. The riots in Houston and Dallas, those folks aren't from Texas. It takes a long time if you're coming from outside of Texas to drive to Dallas or Houston. Texas is a big state. So what state would all these white supremacists who are coming and rioting in all these cities coming from? What state are they from? And the answer, of course, is just that whole narrative is nonsense. That there is no white supremacist conspiracy to try and start these riots. And anyone who is at all in touch with black people in America and with your far left well-to-do folks, essentially your two sides of the coin here, your Antifa and your BLM types, would see that there's no reason to believe that white supremacists are causing this, that there's plenty of built-up anger on the part of your white Antifa crowd and your Black Lives Matter crowd for all of this violence to occur. And actually, during peaceful times, if they just make their points, I tend to agree with a lot of what they say about cops. I'm not a big fan of policing in America, of course, not to get off on a diatribe about that, but I tend to blame more the laws and how things are legislated and our whole legal order here than just how they're enforced, because I look at the way that these laws are written, and there's no real way to enforce them without becoming tyrannical. So these cops, by doing their job, essentially are bad cops. You can't really have a good cop when they're enforcing a bad law. And so I come at this whole situation as someone who should be who should be sympathetic to these folks. But I'm not in any way, because they've totally lost the plot here. And, it's amazing to see folks on, in the sort of your cable news types, CNN, MSNBC, and whatever these other media outlets are, still defending this nonsense. Apparently, I heard this morning on Twitter there's already been a mention of Jesus was a looter on one of these cable networks. Also heard some, I guess you'd call them a games journalist this morning making the case that, well, Sonic the Hedgehog was a rioter, and, we like Sonic, so these guys are cool burning down buildings. I mean, really, so much of this is beyond parody. If I got into if I just got into a whole diatribe on what people are saying about this situation, I'd be here all day. So what's the big picture here? How is the situation evolving? What changed last night, and what can we expect moving forward? From what I'm seeing, my initial narrative about there being a big cresting of violence that would crash against the rocks of a newly reinvigorated police force seems to be dead. The cops are not in control here. You watch the videos of the riot police and National Guard last night from various places across America. They do not seem like they're in control at all. They seem scared. They seem angry. They are not managing the situation well. There have, of course, been numerous instances across the country of journalists being fired upon by the police with rubber bullets. There was many egregious incidents, but one of which was when you had some cops, marching down a residential street with houses, and there were people sitting on, their front stoop, because there weren't porches. These were more sort of urban type houses, so they had stoops, and there were people sitting outside videoing them, and they were shouting at everyone to get inside, get inside, get inside, and and these people probably thought, hey, I'm on my own. I'm standing at my front door. What am I doing wrong? So it didn't even occur to them to go inside. And so the cops, said, light them up. And like 6 of them pointed at this woman who was holding the camera and just started shooting rubber bullets at them. And I look at that, and I'm like, well, these cops clearly don't want to be liked by the civilian populace. They have no interest in trying to endear themselves. They're saying, oh, well, this is an emergency. We need to get everybody. Yeah, no, you're not going to make people like you if you're shooting, people who are literally standing on their own property, their own home, shooting them with rubber bullets because they didn't close the door because they're looking at you the wrong way. And then of course you've got the instance of where some cops were yelling at this photographer to get down. He was holding up his press badge saying press, press, and they said, I don't care, get on the ground. So he got on the ground, covered his head, and then once he was down on the ground not moving, they walked over and pepper sprayed him. Okay, so the cops in this case are not gaining any admirers through their interactions with civilians. And then you look at all these instances where the cops were not present, where they should have been cracking skulls, and innocent people were tormented by these savage looters and rioters. There was one man in Dallas, big video going around, who was savagely beaten by some looters who wanted to, destroy his store. And he very quickly, after, at first he tried to defend his place of work, and then he retreated and ran away, and they chased him down and almost killed him. He wasn't quite dead. He might still die. He's in critical condition. Then you have this couple in Rochester, New York, where there didn't seem to be a whole lot going on, but a group of about 6 or 7 youths were smashing the windows of their store, and so a woman came out and said, hey, stop doing that. So they started beating up the woman. Then her husband came out, and they started beating up him, and so, that's great. No cops in sight. I think the place that seemed to handle this stuff the best was probably Atlanta after what happened Friday night. Governor, I think it's Brian Kemp, right, said that's not going to happen again. And so he sent in the National Guard. They had, troops on the streets. And I think that was enough of a deterrent to stop things from getting too bad. Sure, there were rioters outside the governor's mansion, but that's a very specific sort of place if you're rioting against the government. It's not like you're going in and you're just attacking random people in the streets and tearing their businesses apart and beating them to death. It's not nearly as scary or for me as a citizen to see that there are rioters targeting a specific institution that they have a problem with. Like if there was a bad not that I support rioting, but I'm saying if there's some kind of bad court decision and a murderer gets off, if people, riot outside of the courthouse, I at least understand why they're doing that, even though I think that's wrong. But then again, things might have gotten worse in Atlanta as the night went on. I don't know, because it's hard to follow every single city and know everything that happened. Chicago, unsurprisingly, seemed to have the worst of it. I mean, because even on a normal Saturday in Chicago, things are really bad there. Lots of people get killed. But in this Saturday, Chicago was, being looted in all their really, really expensive stores. On, I think they call it the Magnificent Mile. It's very ritzy part of downtown that has all the high-end stores. And so, what we are seeing from the rioters and the police is more incendiary action that is not going to help the reputation of the police, on their part, and then more violence on the part of the rioters, more businesses being destroyed. And we're starting to see more instances of people trying to defend these places that are being looted. We had, of course, the unsuccessful business owner in Dallas who was apparently trying to defend his business. Well, there was another one in another city, and I can't remember now which city that was, because you see so many of these videos of an instance where a guy, there were some folks, rioting outside of a store, and he pulled up in his red Durango and got out with a shotgun and, pumped it and, fired a shot at the crowd. Didn't seem to hit anybody, but that scared them away, and they ran away. So that was I'm happy to see that, somebody actually successfully defending their business. And you're going to see more of that. Of course, with all this, the nobody needs a 30-round magazine argument is completely dead. Nobody needs an assault weapon. What, do you go into war? Well, yeah. This is America. We're at war. And so, the big winner last night really was the Second Amendment and, gun activists and people who just generally want Americans to defend themselves. Even though lots of America was under siege last night, the good people in America, were being hurt. This is going to produce a backlash because, the silent majority, as Richard Nixon called them, is not going to tolerate this. This is similar, I guess you could say, to the 60s. I don't know whether it's better or worse than the 60s. Probably worse, because I don't believe the rioting back then was coordinated at the same time throughout the entire country. But the 60s was kind of my base case that I was using before for saying how this was going to help sort of the law and order and the police sort of forces in the country. Because that was the backlash against the 60s, was people who became very pro-cop and, wanted Nixon to come in and reimpose law and order in the country. Because, the cops are not only doing things that are, continue to make people not like them, and there doesn't seem to be anyone, especially after the lockdowns and all that, on the left or the right, who are fond of the police at this moment in history. I don't think that the backlash now is going to be a pro-cop backlash, at least not to the extent that it otherwise would have been. No, when there's riots erupting across the country, it's not like that the government can just move resources from one state to another, from one part of a state to another, to try and, mount a massive force of troops that can, reimpose order. If this is happening everywhere, the government's paralyzed, because the government is so incredibly outnumbered compared to the amount of people in this country. And so, once the rioting reaches a critical mass, it will be clear that the government is just plain inept in this situation. But before that even, because now we're starting to see more citizens coming up and trying to defend these things themselves, you're going to see impromptu militias or organized militias that are, just of regular Americans coming out to try and defend these places of business. And the reason why you haven't seen it so much thus far is because this has all been concentrated in the inner city, to where you're not really going to have, right-wing militias. But the combination of this continuing burn, heating up the situation, and the inevitable march from the inner city out to the periphery into the suburbs, is what is going to lead to more, direct retaliation against the rioters. And so, what we're looking for here is some kind of escalation that will make the situation worse. Because right now, people are saying, oh, Boogaloo Civil War. We're not there yet, because there's only one side fighting. We just have these rioters trying to burn things down. We do not have anyone fighting against them. They have essentially no opposition at this point. The police are not effective opposition. The police have not started shooting lethal rounds, by the way. They're shooting less lethal, which can still be lethal, but they're not. It's not designed to kill you. Okay, so the escalation is going to happen either if the cops shoot to using live ammunition and shoot to kill, or if the ordinary citizens, because they don't have rubber bullets, use live ammunition and shoot to kill. Because as long as the rioters go unopposed, this is going to continue to gain steam. The rioters are going to loot more and more. But once they taste a bit of their own blood, once some blood has been shed, well, then that's going to escalate the situation much further, because you're going to bring out more people onto the streets. Because the killing of the rioters is they're going to be martyred, and that's going to enrage sort of friends of the cause. That's when the real fireworks are going to get started, to where you're going to see Americans killing each other in the streets. Right now, it's been pretty isolated. There was an example of a guy in daylight. I don't remember which city, who flashed a red MAGA hat at the crowd, and of course he got just completely engulfed by the mob. But if this continues, you're going to see more equal pairings. You're not going to see one straggler just getting torn to bits. You're going to see actual streets, or actual groups of equal sizes, equal proportions, going at it with each other. But we're not there yet, so I'm not using the term civil war or boogaloo yet, because there has not been enough pushback against these rioters. But as long as this continues to either stay as bad as it is now or get worse, because it is all throughout the country, I think that there's a good chance that it could happen at any time. Of course, it's also possible, because these rioters, it's very important to point out, these rioters do not have a clear defined goal. There is no mass movement, say, to overthrow the U.S. government or something like that. These people are acting on animal instinct. They are, they're angry, and they are greedy. So you have folks who want to break stuff because they're mad at the police. And then you have folks who just want to steal stuff because they want free stuff. Those aren't strong enough motivations to power, an actual revolution or civil war. So it's possible that at any point, if these folks get bored, that the violence will de-escalate and slow to a crawl. For now, George Floyd has been their motivation. That's been their rallying cry. But unless there's more blood, I don't think that this will continue. We're going to have to see them actually get killed. And I'm not advocating for this. I'm saying that, I'm being optimistic in that I don't think that this can continue forever at the current pace. So we hopefully will see a break in this stalemate, and things can get back to normal, peaceful life. Of course, the issues at hand, the underlying issues, are not going to go away. These folks will still be angry at the cops for a lot of legitimate reasons, in my opinion. But their immediate destruction will come to an end. So we'll see what happens tonight. I will be keeping my eye out for escalations, for deaths. But destruction at this point seems to be baked into the cake. Everyone's kind of accepted that as part of the, as within the rules of engagement. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.